make a promise to yourself that if this is something that you want bad enough, if this is really your passion and this is what drives you, don't let someone else dictate and determine your path.
Welcome to the Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster. My guest today is a former TV news anchor, reporter, meteorologist. Today he's teaching journalism at the University of Florida, where he was recently named Teacher of the Year, among other awards. Harrison Hove, thank you so much for making time for this today.
Gosh, thank you so much for having me. Anytime we can talk about journalism and education and students, I'm all in.
That's awesome. Well, you know what? You are you are the first that I've talked to who's gone from in the business to teaching about the business. So I'm excited about what you're going to share, because you're going to share exactly what the demographic I'm aiming for needs to hear. So no pressure, right? All right, Harrison, let's talk about your career, your TV journey specifically. You know, what got you interested in TV, when you pursued it, and just bring us up to date in a Cliff Notes version, because I know that's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. But just give us an idea of what your background is and where you're at today.
Yeah, so I was always interested in politics. I watched a lot of news as a kid, and when I came to the University of Florida as an undergraduate, an advisor said to me, you have so many credits, you should think about double majoring. And what do you like? What are you interested in? And I said, well, I've always watched the news. I grew up in a family where we consumed a lot of news over dinner. We would watch that type of programming. And so it just made sense to me and it fit well with politics. And so those were the courses I pursued while I was at the University of Florida. And as I got more into it, I realized that in many ways, I was interested in politics to serve a community, but that's exactly what journalists do. There is such a need for journalists who are willing to shine their spotlight on really critical issues in a community. And so as I went through the curriculum, I was more and more into this whole idea of you don't need to hold elective office to be a leader in your community or to do positive things. Journalists, just by definition, can do that. And, once I left the University of Florida, I actually went and got a meteorology degree as well at Florida State. And I felt like, especially in today's world, I wanted to be as flexible as possible with my skill set in order to make me as marketable as possible. So while I was at Florida State, I started working as an internet content producer, is kind of what we call it today. I was just kind of posting stories to the web for WCTV in Tallahassee. Once I graduated and left Tallahassee, I went to work at KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana, where I was a meteorologist and reporter. Stayed there for about a year, went on to the Ohio News Network. It is no longer in existence, but it was a statewide cable network based out of Columbus, Ohio, and it served the whole state of Ohio. I was a meteorologist and a reporter there before I did some freelance work and ultimately ended up working for WCMH, that's NBC4, in Columbus, Ohio, for about 3 years as a news anchor, reporter, meteorologist. I left that role back in 2017 and went to the University of Florida, where at first I started as a news manager in the student-powered newsroom, right? So I was news manager overseeing TV content creation. Since then, have moved into a faculty position at UF. And I still do some freelance on the side. So, I like to keep my feet wet in the industry because the industry is evolving so quickly that it's important for any educators to be able to give that, number one, first person insight is really important, but current first person insight is even better. So,
yeah, that's great stuff. And I'm going to dive into each one of those areas. I'm going to try to break it down with your first opportunity. How do you think you broke through, or do you know how you broke through into such a competitive business and industry?
you mean my very, very first part-time job making like 650 an hour in Tallahassee?
Well, whatever you consider your breakthrough.
Um, so I think for me, I did an internship. I did 3 internships, and the
Wow.
reason, I mean, there's a lot of privilege there to be able to do 3 internships, especially in the days when you weren't paid for internships.
Right.
But I felt it was really important, number one, to get a feel for what's inside the newsroom, but number two, to build relationships. So much in life is about who you know. And, the internship that I did at WCTV in the weather department, fostering and building those relationships directly led to my ability to land a part-time job as an internet content producer. My second year in Tallahassee, just working. And so once I left and was looking for my first full-time job, I actually had commercial TV experience on my resume. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but certainly building some skills and just showing that I demonstrated responsibility in a professional capacity. I had competencies that maybe set me apart, or experiences that may have set me apart from the crowd. So I think it's that, the relationships got my foot in the door. When I got my foot in the door for the part-time job, it then allowed me to have a different level conversation with a hiring manager for my first full-time job, with a little bit more, background and insight or information, as a paid journalist at a commercial television station.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Relationships are critical in any line of work, right? I mean, obviously in journalism, where it seems like TV journalism, especially TV, is so small, where we can be connected by one other person. Just for example, how you and I got connected. Liz Adiola, she's out in Utah. I am in, I basically say Cincinnati. I'm in Northern Kentucky. You're in Florida, and that's just how crazy of an industry it really is. Even though you and I are no longer, well, I'm no longer in it. You, for the most part, are with teaching it and whatnot. But it is such a small industry, and I love that you said that relational element. So is that something you tell your students? Because that's one of the things that you can tell them, but it's not really in the textbooks. I mean, you can teach them all the technical things too, but what are some of the things that you do tell your students?
I mean, we talk about a whole lot of things because this industry, it's just so much more than being a competent writer, shooter of video, and an editor. There's a lot more to it. Following up on that relationship thing, I do like to share a lot of my own personal experiences, not as this is the way that it is going to be, but here's an example of a real life case where this happened, right? And so, I think about, when it comes to relationships, one quirky, weird thing that I do is I have saved every single email I have ever exchanged with a news director or like a hiring manager. And the reason that I do that is because you never know when you're going to cross paths with someone again. You just said, it's such a small business. So the news director you're talking to today in Terre Haute, Indiana, might be the news director in Seattle in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years that you want a job from. And so it's really, I think people are always kind of drawn in by this idea when I can recall and say, you know what? We actually talked 3 years ago or 5 years ago when you were looking for this, or that. And just people love those stories that I can recall, mainly because I save the emails and can reflect in and read through them.
Hmm.
But it's just a great way to show that you're interested, you care, you don't forget names. That kind of stuff really matters on like a human level. So it's just a weird quirk that I do, but I think is really important because it does demonstrate the value of just human relationships and networking in general.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, if you can remember someone's name, or if you can recall another time, and I think that would be awfully flattering. I think that's a great tip. So hopefully somebody, it's those small details, right, that are going to add up. You have a bunch of small details, and it can really separate you from maybe the other person that they're considering. So tell us about what it's like this day and age with teaching aspiring journalists, future journalists, and just the challenges that you have of, considering the COVID-19 season, I guess is what I'm getting at. And such a hard time. It's tough to break into this business as is, but then we have this transition of where, obviously we're coming out of it a little bit, but everything was virtual, just like this. If you had to do an interview with somebody, they had to do it virtually. But what challenges did you have to navigate through during that season, and did that change how you taught your journalist students and trying to get their first opportunity or their next opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, so the pandemic itself was a challenge, right? But what I would say in this, the way that I feel like I was impacted might be very similar to journalists working in the trenches, and that is the show has to go on. While the world has this ability to hit pause and just kind of stop, the education process at the university continues. And in fact, my students, they don't get all of a sudden this magic year where they can just go to school for free, right? The time and clocks still tick. They never ever stopped. And so it was incumbent upon me to create pathways for students to acquire those skills and to be successful. It's just like the news never stopped. And so journalists had to figure out creative ways in which to make it happen, generate that content. And so what I appreciated about the pandemic and the restraints that were kind of or the circumstances that were pushed on us was this idea that we can think more outside the box than ever before. We can be different. We don't have to do things the way that they've always been done in order to achieve the goals. And we saw that in an instant, many TV stations changed. Years worth of change, like how slow has some change been at television stations, and all of a sudden overnight, boom, you're just forced to do things different. So I enjoyed that because it allowed us to dream a little bit differently and how we achieve certain goals that we need to do. And so I'll say that, like, yeah, the pandemic was hard, but guess what? If you don't have the equipment anymore to shoot with a camera, you can still be a mobile journalist with a smartphone. Technology is such that you can turn content that looks as professional um, with like your smartphone, maybe a microphone that goes, into your phone. Just technology is there that you don't have to look like a professional journalist. And we can't be hung up on this idea that you have to tote around a huge camera and a huge tripod, hurt your back, it's so heavy. That's not the reality anymore. And so to help people think outside the box to achieve the goals was really a remarkable thing. And I can only speak for my students, and that is they made it happen. And in a time when we think about the summer of 2020 when there were a lot of hiring freezes, it was really hard to get a job. And so, how are you going to stand out even more from your peers in those instances when the economy is presents a challenge to you? And I think the answer is think outside the box, be different, stand out, certainly adhere to like the principles of great journalism, but allow your storytelling to differentiate yourself. Allow, your presentation to differentiate yourself. Those are still things that you can control. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice in those instances. And I'm really happy to say that, the students who work directly with me who want to go into this industry when they graduate, we're great, in terms of placing them and them getting off on the right foot in terms of their trajectory and career path.
Yeah, that's great hearing about that resourcefulness that you're trying to implement and that you clearly implemented not only by teaching your students, but you had to implement it yourself, and figure out how to keep that show going on. That's great to hear. I can only imagine what it was like to constantly be changing your approach to teaching these, the technical things, the things that they need to know, but also, like you said, thinking outside the box. That's incredibly just valuable information. So, with that said, how did you develop your skill set? Obviously, way ahead of COVID-19, but to get to where you are today, how did you develop the skill set that you have and putting you in a position of quote unquote success, if you will, to able to climb the ladder and to get to the point where you're continuing to teach it and be involved in. How would you say you developed those things? What worked for you in getting better at your craft?
At my craft of storytelling or at my craft of teaching? And the
Let's
answer might be
focus
one and the
on the
same.
journalism aspect for those pursuing it. So,
Yeah.
as a journalist,
I think for me, one of the ways that I pushed myself to, right? And the first is within your newsroom, there's always going to be people who are those veteran journalists who have been there, done that, who can provide so much insight. And so maybe you're not in a professional like television or broadcast job yet, and you're just in your classroom space. Well, in those instances, your professors are going to have that experience, and there might be students in your class or in your program who you put on a pedestal and you highly regard their work. Well, if that's the case, I would always say look at what those people are doing and have conversations with them about what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's not magic. So much of it is awareness. It's not that you can't do it. It's that maybe the light bulb hasn't gone off to where you realize, oh, you can do a stand up that's really creative. Instead of just standing there, someone can walk you through how they did a multi-camera stand up with just one person as an MMJ, or different tools they used, or an editing effect. So much of that is through asking and talking, and when someone's in front of you, they can even show you, right? So it's that mentorship, it's that kind of connection within your personal bubble. I would say that I see students transform when they surround themselves and engage with people who they think are really talented in our space, right? But beyond that, there's an opportunity to learn and grow, and we're so fortunate that we can access product and see the work of journalists in markets across the country. And great advice that I received way back when was look at all these different reporters, consume what they do. Look at reporters in Minneapolis, look at reporters out in California, look at reporters down in Florida, and see what stands out to you. What do you like? What do you not like? You learn so much by just watching content, and then you figure out your own style or find your own voice by, I think, piecemealing a lot of what you see and kind of putting it together in your own way, to make it truly yours or uniquely yours. Those were two really big things for me, like that mentorship, those relationships face to face, where you can just ask anything, and then number two is just watching people that you really respect, what they do right, what they do wrong, and what works for you.
I couldn't agree more. And the common denominator here in both of those is basically others, right? You don't have to do it yourself. Go to others for mentorship. Go to others to see how they're doing it. That is so awesome. Harrison, talk about how you made that transition from being in front of the camera to being in front of a classroom. What was it that inspired you to teach what you know?
Well, I'll say that, a little bit of what we do every single day as a journalist is teach and educate. We're
Sure.
shining light on different issues. And so I feel like there's a natural teacher, there's a natural educator in all of us, right? We are, what I realized, a lot more gifted with presentation because we've had that professional skill development over so many years that it's just such a natural transition for a lot of us, I think, me included. And so I think I really appreciated this idea of imparting knowledge and giving knowledge to people when I was in industry, helping the community. But I also value the idea of those one-on-one classroom relationships. And so as I thought long and hard, after being in the business a little bit more than 10 years, you start thinking like, okay, is this it for me? Or what else could I do? And I was always so fearful of like, what else is out there? I don't know if I'd be good. Like, what could I do? And it just kept for me coming back to teaching, 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 teaching. Education has been so influential in my life, and I thought maybe there's a way to give back. And so I actually applied for some jobs unsuccessfully, right? At the collegiate level, at the university level, just put my name out there and just gave it a whirl. And just nothing was biting. I wasn't getting any response. And then sure enough, Ohio State, I had applied unsuccessfully to a job there. And about 6 months later, I got a call. And the person said, I got your name probably from applying and not getting advanced. But I want to talk to you about an opportunity to create a broadcast journalism course here at Ohio State. And I thought, I don't know how this person got my name or how it worked out, but I'm really interested in this opportunity, so let me explore it. And sure enough, so I was able to be an adjunct for a semester to just get a feel for how, if this could work for me. And I really, really enjoyed it. And that was the start of it for me. I mean, I did it for 3 semesters, just one class. In addition to teaching that adjunct class, I was still working full time, at NBC4 in Columbus. But I thought this feels right. Let me look to see if I can make this jump, and it really it worked out. And I'll just share with you, I had 2 opportunities, and both opportunities people knew me from my journalism career. And so it just shows like these relationships and what you do 5 years ago or 10 years ago still matters as you look forward. And so both opportunities, one came at the University of Florida where I got my formal training in journalism, and the other came in a town in which I had previously worked, where they recalled me being on their television screen years before. So
That's awesome. That is so cool. So tell us what exactly are you teaching? Like, I know you said, yeah, you went from, well, you tell us. I'm not going to try to, reiterate what you said, but if you could take us through what you teach your students on a daily basis. I mean, is it like, do you guys have your own news channel, or is it like an introductory, or are there different levels? What exactly are you teaching?
So I primarily teach 3 different classes, right? One is a
Okay.
broadcast writing class, and that's just learning how to write. I mean, if you talk to pros, one of the biggest weaknesses for people entering our profession or the journalism profession is the ability to write. And so
Hmm.
I teach a whole class that's dedicated to broadcast writing. And the idea here is that we start with the fundamentals. I always tell my students, when you're building your journalism skill set, it's just like building a house. You can't pick out your light fixtures and your cabinetry and any of the fancy fun features until you lay the solid foundation. And so laying that foundation, one of the pillars is going to be broadcast writing. So that's number
Hmm.
one. Another class that I teach is TV news reporting, right? And in TV news reporting, I teach it to where you've never touched a camera before. Why? Because there are people in this world who have varying levels of experiences, right? And so maybe you came from a high school that had a great program, but maybe you didn't. Guess what? You can be a great broadcast journalist regardless of what your previous experiences are. You just need to be taught from a fundamental level. And so television news reporting focuses on teaching broadcast writing, right? We're building on what we learned in that previous class, but also how to shoot video with a camera. And so we talk about the professional aspects of like, how do you sequence? How do you use a tripod even? How do you interview or connect a microphone to your camera? So it's like basic stuff that we then build on.
Hmm.
And then we also learn to edit. Um, and we use Adobe Premiere at the University of Florida. So I would say you walk into the class not knowing anything, but we graduate to doing VOs and VOSOTs and then packages by the end. And so that's like solidifying the foundation. We talk about storytelling too as we start to build those packages, and whether you want to tell a story that's, in chronological order, which is okay, or if you want to do some circular storytelling or character-centered storytelling, which might be a next level of advanced storytelling there. Um, and then if you can navigate through that, we have an in-depth reporting course where I typically do like a special assignment. For instance, in the fall of 2020, I sent my whole class to Lake Charles, Louisiana, 700 miles away, to do a story about Lake Charles that was hit by 2 hurricanes in the same hurricane season. We've sent students on more high stakes reporting because they're ready for it and they are going to do their best work. We bring that stuff back, turn it into a 30-minute special, but we also have students walk away with individual stories they can put on a reel to market themselves, and show their achievement at the highest levels, which will yield a really great potential opportunity for them professionally.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Harrison, I want to respect your time, but I want to leave this last one up to you. One last parting piece of advice or one last thing that you absolutely want to share that I didn't ask you about, anything that comes to mind that you think, you know what, I can't leave this conversation without parting with this piece of wisdom.
I see it all the time, in my classes, and that is people really give up too soon. Um, and what I'll say is, if you're new to the industry or you're trying to get your foot into the industry, make a promise to yourself that if this is something that you want bad enough, if this is really your passion and this is what drives you, don't let someone else dictate and determine your path. Whether that's a teacher who you perceive to be too tough, or a jerk of a hiring manager who told you you'll never amount to anything, right? It takes just one door to open. That's it. And so if someone says, hey, here's a part-time opportunity, you have to assess to see, like, could that work for me? Or, hey, we have an opportunity, but it's overnights. Well, guess what? Like, it's an opportunity, and you have to make the most of any opportunity. And a lot of it comes down to, number one, are you willing to invest the time to be great? And being great doesn't happen automatically, right? It's this growth mindset of every day you want to get better. Every time you do a news package, what went right? What went wrong? What can you do better next time? And if you come and go through that process, you apply that knowledge going forward, your work is going to get better every single time out of the gate. So the opportunities are going to come. And when it comes to a tough job search, whether it's the economy or your work is, close, but maybe a lot of people are like, you're not ready. It's just like dating. It takes one. It just takes one. Every person is not going to be a fan of yours, and that is okay, right? It's not possible to have, an infinite number of fans. It just takes one.
Right.
And so you find that person who believes in you, and you ride that wave, because that's opportunity, and that's where careers start. It's not where they end. You got to get started somewhere, and walk through the door when the doors open. If this is something that you're passionate and really, really want to do, make it happen.
That's great stuff. All the above. Awesome stuff, Harrison. Like I said, I cannot thank you enough for making time for this and everything that you shared here. I have no doubt whoever sees this, whoever listens to it, just got better just by being here and taking in what you had to share. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. And thanks for the opportunity to just talk about some of these important aspects and elements, to either getting involved in broadcast news or continuing to grow within the industry.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.